Guys, so today we are doing PSAT slides, in preparation for the PSATs that you guys are going to take pretty soon. So just grab a piece of scrap paper and go through all of these problems, and then, hopefully you're better off for, having gone through the video and, maybe you get something right that you would have gotten wrong on the PSATs. But just take out a piece of scrap paper. I got no classwork for you. We're just going to do these problems and then you guys are done. So, number one, what you're going to do is just kind of read the question, pause the video, and then resume the video, and I'll give you the answer for all of these. All right, so hopefully you have an answer by now. You're going to find that the answer is C, 420. And then really quickly how it works, you can set this one up like a proportion here. So if you're going to do it that way, they cut 45 lawns in 12 hours. So you need to figure out how many they cut in 16 hours. So you're going to set a proportion like that over 16. Just one way to do it. When you do it this way, you'll get something like x is going to equal 60. Right? So that's how many they're going to do in 16 hours. And then times 7 days a week is going to be 420 lawns per week. All right. Number two, pause the video. Okay, this says PS is 4. What is length of PR? When you do this one out, you should get an answer of A, 10.7. So you have Q lies on PR. And then the length of Q is 1/3 the length of, the length of QR is 1/3 the length of PQ. So one way you could do this is you could just say, okay, well, if QR is going to be X, then PQ is going to be 3X. Or you could have said PQ is X and then QR is 1/3 X. It wouldn't make any difference. Or there's other ways to do this too, but this is the way that I did it. So it's also telling you that, the midpoint from P to Q is 4, right? So PS, the midpoint's 4. So that just means from P to Q is going to be 4 plus 4, right? Two midpoints be the whole thing. So basically that 3x part that we labeled is going to be equal to 8. And when you get x by itself, it's going to be 8/3. So that just means this part here is 8/3. And this part here is 8 like we already figured out. So it's 8 plus 8/3, or 8 plus 2.6666, right? And that's going to be 10.66 repeating, so 10.7. All right, pause the video. All right, this one, a little bit more work. Certainly doable, though. You're going to have this 3x squared minus 11x plus 7 equals 27. So it's basically a quadratic, and it's factorable. So you're going to have 3x squared minus 11x, and then minus 20 equals 0. So you want to get it equal to 0 so that you can factor it. It does factor right into 3x plus 4 and x minus 5. So you got two answers. You're going to get x equals negative 4/3 from this one over here on the left when you set this one equal to 0. And when you set this one equal to 0, you're going to get x equals 5. So I don't know about you, but I'd rather try 5 and see if that's an answer, right? So when I have the answer of 5x plus 3, notice how the number 5 is an answer here, right? That's kind of a decoy. You get one answer of 5, you're like, oh yeah, that must be it. Same thing with negative 1.3, which is part B. That's negative 4/3. So they do those on purpose. They're distractors. Don't be distracted. Make sure you answer the question. So 5x plus 3, if you plugged in 5 into 5x plus 3, you'd get 25 plus 3, which is 28. So 28 is one possible solution. Unfortunately, it's not in your bank. So that just means it's going to have to be the negative 4/3 is your answer. So it's 5 times negative 4/3 and then plus 3. which is going to be negative 20 thirds plus 3, or 9 thirds. So negative 20 thirds, negative 20 thirds plus 9 thirds would give you negative 11 thirds. So if you look at your answers, negative 11 thirds is the same thing as negative 3 and 2 thirds, which is like negative 3.66 repeating. So you're going to get an answer of C, which is negative 3.7. All right, moving on. I have x plus 2x plus 3x. You got the problem right there. Go ahead and solve it, and then resume the video. All right, so this answer you get, D, negative 1, x plus 2x plus 3x, you can actually just add all those terms together, the like terms. You're going to get 6x. M minus 2m minus 3m is like 1m minus 2m, negative 1m, and then minus 3 more is negative 4m. So when you do it that way, and you plug in 3 halves for m, you're going to get 6x equals negative 4 times 3 halves. Right? And then basically from there you can solve it. You would get negative 6 divided by 6, and then you'd get x equals negative 1. Right? And that's your answer. Next, go ahead and pause it. All right, so for this one, good question. I like this one because it kind of requires you to think a little bit, especially about fractions and stuff. The answer is D, 1/4. But usually when you get these ones, sometimes when they give you 3 and you get to test all of them, sometimes you get a better off testing the last one, or the one that's a fraction, because they're out there to kind of take away time from your other questions. So if you take the right attitude and say, okay, I'm going to look at this one here, this one might be the one that kind of decides whether or not the answer choices are right. Might be a better strategy, but there's no way to do this one other than plugging the numbers in and checking, right? So when you did like 1/2 divided by 1, right? That's clearly not an integer. It's just 1/2. 1/2 divided by 2, same thing as 1/2 times 1/2. That's going to be 1/4. Clearly not an answer. 1/2 divided by 1/5 is the same thing as 1/2 times 5. Right? That's 5 halves. Still not an integer. 2/3, you can do 2/3. 1/2 times 3/2 instead of dividing by 3 halves. Just multiply by the reciprocal. Same thing though, you get 3/4, it doesn't work. The only one that does work is 1/4. Same thing as times 4. 1/2 times 4 is 2. 2 is an integer. All right, here's the next one. All right, this one we should get an answer of D, 1/14, right? The probability of first choosing a red marble, right? Well, you got 21 marbles total, so it's 3 out of 21. And then choosing a yellow marble, as long as you didn't replace it, right? There's 10 yellow marbles, and there's only 20 left. So that's the same thing as 1/2 if you want to reduce it first. And when you have two separate events, right, you multiply each probability. So it's 3 over 21, which I'm just going to say is 1/7 times 1/2. And that gets you to the negative, or to the 1/14. All right, number 7. All right, number 7, another good question. A is twice as big as C, right? The first thing you notice here is you have an equation with 3 variables. You can never solve an equation with 3 variables. You can't even solve it with 2 variables, right? You can only solve an equation with 1 variable as long as you're not dealing with a system. But here, we have a system, but you still have the same thing. You can only solve something with there's 1 variable in it. So what we're going to do first is we're going to say, okay, A is twice as big as C, which just means it takes 2 C's to equal A. And then we're also going to say it says C and A are equal to B, so C plus A equals B. And then it says what is the value of B. So now we're going to look at our equation. And it says 3A, but I already said before A is the same thing as 2C. So instead of saying A, I'm going to say 2C. I'm going to try and write the whole thing in terms of C. Then it says plus B, but B is the same thing as C plus A. And we just said before, A is 2C. So I'm going to say, instead of saying A again, I'm going to say 2C again. And then the last part of the equation is plus C. And that is equal to 18. All right, so if I go this way, I am going to get 6. Whoops, I had a negative here. Negative 6C plus 3C plus C is equal to 18. And when you add all those up, you're going to get C equals negative 9. And what do you notice about your answer key? The first choice is negative 9. That is done on purpose. Not really sure what the heck that was. Right? That's done on purpose, right? They're trying to fool you until you get your first answer and doing all the work, and it's letter A, and you think you're saving time by just circling A and moving on to the next question. But it's actually, no, sorry, letter C, but the answer choice is A. The question is, what is B, though, right? So you didn't answer the question by selecting A, which was negative 9, right? You want to find out what B is. So you'd have to look at your answers. You got C is negative 9, right? So 2C is A, so 2 times negative 9 is going to be negative 18. So A is negative 18, another answer choice. C was negative 9, so C plus A, which is finally what's equal to B, is going to be negative 18 from there, negative 9 from there, and you're going to get C, negative 27. There's number 8. Number 8, there's 2 ways to do this. I mean, you have access to a graphing calculator, so it might be a quicker way to just graph each one, although this one's math isn't too intense. But basically, you got your plan 1, which is going to be an equation of 20 plus 0.3x, and x represents the miles driven. And you want to set it equal to plan 2, which is 10 plus 0.35x. And when you do that, you'll find the amount of miles when the 2 plans cost the same. So here you subtract 10 and subtract 3x, and you should get up something like 10 equals 0.05x. And if you did 0.5x, which is a very common mistake, right, you would probably get an answer of B, which is 20. However, 0.05 is definitely very different. You need to multiply both sides by 200. I'm sorry, by 10. And but basically, you could divide both sides by 0.05, as that's fine, and you'll get something like 200 equals x. So that would be where your miles are. Again, if you wanted to graph this line and then graph this line, y1 and y2 in your calculator, and just find the intersection, you could certainly do it that way too. But you'll find that the answer, no matter which way you do it, is going to be D200. All right, there's number 9 right there. Okay, so number 9's answer is going to be D, 0.2.4. And how do you get it? Well, think about the slope, right? You have the origin right there, which is 0, 0. So you basically got to think, okay, the slope is going to be the change in y, which is 2 minus 0, over the change in x, which is 1 minus 0, if you're going to use the origin, which is easy. And you're going to get the slope is equal to 2. So you got to figure out, and again, I would use the origin for all of these points, but you got to figure out which one is also going to have a slope of 2 if it's really going to be on that line. So you can plug in all of these ones. 2.5 minus 0 over 1.5 minus 0, it's not 2. Right? Negative 1 over 0 over negative 2 minus 0 over 0. Negative 1 minus 0 over -2 minus 0 for part B doesn't work. The only one that does work is this one, is D. So if you had 0.4 minus 0 over 0.2 minus 0, that's the same thing as 2. So the answer is D, 0.2, 0.4. All right, number 10. Go ahead and take a second to read it and then answer it. All right, and if you've answered that one, you should have gotten A, 250,000. When you think about Madison and Sheridan, that's total of 17.5%. And when you multiply that, so 0.175 times your 5 million people, I think you get an answer. Let me see if I have this one. Yeah, 875,000 people. And then when you do the same for Worth and Pacific, that's 12.5% times 5 million, you get 625,000 people. So just simply subtract the 2 and you get an answer of 250,000, which is A. All right, number 11, kind of hard to read, but read it and answer it. All right, number 11. This one's really kind of self-explanatory. The answer is A, right? Twice the sum of x and y. So sum just means adding, and then twice means multiply by 2. And so really the only two that make any sense are A and B so far. And then 3 times the product of x and 2y, so x times 2y, not x plus 2y. It's just a matter of making sure you know what the words sum and product mean. Hopefully we got those ones right. 12, another question that I like here. You have to read it, and then I'll give you the answer. Okay, so this is a little bit more complicated. We have a number that is between, well, we have x is something between 0 and 1. And then if you add 1 to x, for which of the following functions can create the largest difference? All right, so you don't even know what x is, so it's kind of like, well, where do you start? Well, if you have an interval like this, start with one of the lowest possible numbers or one of the highest possible numbers, and then just kind of see what the answers give. So I'm going to try like 0.01. And then if I add 1 to x, I would get something like 1.01. So I want to compare this is 0.01 and 1.01 in each of these, right? So if I think about 0.01, 1 divided by 0.01 is going to be 100. And then 1 divided by 1.01 is pretty much going to be 1. So that's a pretty big difference right away, right? It's like 100 versus 1, right? That's a huge difference. And if you think about if I did 0.000001, it would be like, tens of thousands versus something that's right around 1. So that could be a huge difference. So kind of hinted that that's already the answer. But you're dividing here. So this is a little bit different. When you do 5 minus x, right, if you did 5 minus 0.01, you get like 4.99, you get 2 times that, okay? And then if you did 5 minus 1.01, you get like 4, and then 2 times that is 8, so like, 8 times, the difference between 8 and 10 is really not that big. Just x by itself is just looking at literally the difference between the two, which is 1, so that's not very big. And then 1 plus x and 1 minus x are still going to be a difference of 1. Anytime you're adding and subtracting, it doesn't account for as huge of a difference as if you divided, right? So another question which kind of relies on dividing by fractions or decimals, which again you need to know results in a bigger number, as long as it's between 0 and 1, which this one is. So a good question. Definitely kind of want to have an idea of how that makes sense. Dividing by smaller numbers makes a bigger number and stuff like that. But even if you took a guess, I mean, minus x, just x by itself, plus x, minus x, the only operation that's different is division in this one. I mean, this one is multiplication a little bit, but you're not multiplying the x directly. You're multiplying, an absolute value that involves a subtraction sign first. So the only one that's really different Even if you took a guess, is A. So that would have been a good guess. Okay, and then also with this one, I tried 0.01 because I got a huge difference. You'd probably stop there. But if you tried 0.99, it actually wouldn't have made as big a difference. But it's also a good thing to try. All right, so there is 13. So try that one. Actually, hold on. Let me scroll down so you can see it. Okay, there is... Well, you can't really see the whole bottom. There you go. All right, 13, you get an answer of 1 comma 3. Hopefully we all got that. Right, how do you get it? Well, basically, if it's a parabola, it's symmetrical about the vertex. So if you think about negative 5, 3, you move to the right 3 to get to negative 2, 3. You can move to the right 3 more, and that would get you to 1, 3. All right, 14, a little bit of complex numbers for the Algebra 2 crew. All right, so 14, hopefully you all got. The answer is B, 1 and 4, right? Negative 3.5 is something that can be rewritten as a ratio or rational number. Square root of 7 is irrational because it's non-perfect. 2i is imaginary, so it doesn't even fall within the real number system. 2.083, there is a hat on top of that, so repeating decimals, you can write them as rational numbers. So that's 1 and 4. All right, 15. Okay, so if you've done 15, another good problem, I like this one, you're going to have to do a little bit of work here. So you're expressing e as a function of k. So what's the one letter that you are not dealing with at all? Well, that's p, right? If you're expressing e as a function of p, you don't want, of k, you don't want any p's in that equation. So I'm going to take this second equation, probably just because it's going to be a little easier to work with, and I'm going to get 4ep equals 1. And so if I want to get rid of p, I want to be able to substitute something in 4p when I'm working with this equation. When I'm working with this equation, right? So I need to get p by itself so that whatever p is equal to, I can substitute it into that equation. So all I need to do is divide by 4e. So I'm going to get p is equal to 1 over 4e. And now instead of saying p right there, I can say 1 over 4e and substitute it in for that p right there. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to have k over 2 equals 3 times, and instead of p, I got 1 over 4e and squared. So I'll square it first, although you could multiply by 2, it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to square it so that I get 1 over 16e squared. Now keep in mind I need e as a function of k, so I need to get e by itself. That's the one I'm expressing as a function of k, so it's almost like f as a function of x. So I need to get the y or the e by itself. So a couple ways you can do this. It's really not going to make a huge difference either way. I'll divide both sides by this 3 just to get rid of the 3, but it doesn't really matter either way. But if I divide by 3, I'm going to get k over 6 equals 1 over 16e squared. From here, running out of room a little bit, but from here, I can multiply both sides by that same 16e squared. So I'll do that. So I got 16e squared and 16e squared. So that'll give me 16e squared k in the numerator, but 16 over 6 is going to be reduced. 16e squared. Well, I won't do that yet. Okay. I'm going to have 16 e squared k over 6 equals, on the right side, all that's left is 1. All right, so why I didn't do that, well, I'm just going to multiply by 6 now. I could have, though. Multiply both sides by 6, and I get 16. E squared k is going to be equal to 6. I'm going to divide by that 16. So I'm going to get e squared k is equal to 6 over 16, which is 3/8. Now, again, I'm pretty close to getting e by itself, but what I need to do first is divide by k. So then I'm going to get e squared is equal to 3/8 divided by k is the same thing as 3 over 8k. Right? Think of it in terms of multiplying by 1 over k if you want. And then take the square root. So you're going to get e is equal to the square root of, that answer right there. 3 over 8k. And that's your answer. And if you look at C, that's your answer. Now, you could have said it could be plus or minus, but it doesn't give you that, so I think you'd have to assume that C would be the only answer. All right, definitely a longer problem. There's 16. Not a multiple choice, so just fill in. All right, another trickier question here. We have x as a positive integer, which helps, right? So that means it's a regular counting number here. And one possible value, that's what you need to find for the units digit of 103 to the 2x. So you can think of this as 103 squared to the x, right? Your power of a power rule says that you multiply the exponents, so a power raised to a power 2 and then x. You can multiply them, but the reason I want to do it like this is because, you can kind of ignore these first two digits. It's going to be something, could be anything big, but the 3 is what's going to end up being squared. So you're going to end up with something, 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 but 9 on the end of it. So then you're really thinking about something, 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 9 to the x. So again, it doesn't really matter what's going to come before it because it's going to be 9 to the x. So you don't know how many times this 9 is going to get multiplied over, but there's only a couple possibilities when you multiply 9 by 9 by 9, a couple times. So if you think about 9 times 9, right, that answer is 81. So the units digit is 1. Think about 9 times 9 times 9. I think that's 729. And the units digit is 9, right? Even if it was, just 9 by itself and the x was 1, the units digit is 9. 9 to the first, right? 9 only has two different numbers, right? You can multiply 9 by as many times as you want. It always is going to end in a 1 or a 9, and that is always, always, always the case. So your answer for this one is 1 or 9. Okay, definitely tricky to see it. Again, if you're not sure how to figure it out, just kind of think, okay, well, let me just try plugging in some numbers. And you have a calculator, and then just kind of go from there. Probably the easier way to do it. All right, there's 17. A few more. All right, so you got to think about this. We have a length of 3 sides. One of the lengths is 5. One of the lengths is 23. So in order to make a triangle, the sides have to somehow get to each other. So if this 23 is the longest side, 5 isn't going to take up very much space, right? Say that one is your 5 right there. So in order to make a triangle, this side has to be, it can't be 5, right? If you have 5 and then 23 here at the, you got 5 right there and then 23 here. If this was 5, it wouldn't make it to the end of this, right? Even if it was right on top of itself, right? Say 5 ends there, another 5 is only going to end right there. It's not even going to make it to 23. So if this is 5 right here, it needs to be 18 just so that, if you kind of layered it right on top of this one, it would at least get to 23, but you wouldn't have any room to create an angle. So this side right here has to be or this distance right here has to be bigger than 18, right? Because 5 and 18 would at least get you to the 23 without an angle. So at least you have something bigger than 18, then it'll get you even the slightest of angles. So you kind of want to be able to picture this one visually and say, okay, well, it's got to be at least 18. But then for the same reason, if you have, 5 and then you're 23, if you have something that's way too big for the third side, this 23 is only going to get you to here, 5 is only going to get you to here. This is too big, so there's a limit, right? And that limit is going to be, it's got to be smaller than 28 for the same thing. 5 and 23 is only going to get you to 28. So if it's smaller than 28, then the 5 and the 23 can at least get you an angle. So you're thinking of numbers that are, bigger than 18 and smaller than 28. So when you think about prime numbers in between there, right, and they can't be equal to it because then there's no angle that's created. Prime numbers, you got 19 and you got 23, and that's it. So those are your two answers for that one. 19 or 23. All right, there's 18. All right, so the greatest four-digit number that has all of the characteristics listed above, right? So when you think about four-digit numbers, they have to add, all the digits have to add up to 6. So you got to think, okay, well, how can I even create 6? Well, 3 plus 2 plus 1 plus 0 is 6. And that's, probably going to be your best bet. So, even like, but if you had 6 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0, that's 6, but, each digit's not different. 5 plus 1 plus 0, but then you have to have that fourth digit be 0, still not the same. You could have 4 plus 1 plus 1 plus 0, but again, you repeated the 1. So the biggest digit to start with you're ever going to have is 3. So you're going to start with 3, and then you think, okay, well, the biggest is if I just go 3, 2, 1, 0, right? Problem is 3, 2, 1, 0 is not odd. So you're going to need to flip-flop your 1 and your 0. And then you get 3, 2, 0, 1 would be the answer. All right, and finally, number 19. All right, the answer for number 19 is 1076 voters. And a good way to get this one, if we kind of go through it, you want to think about if they're going to vote differently for candidate Z instead of candidate X, the quickest way to get there is to just forget about the people who voted for Y. You're going to kill two birds with one stone if you change the people who voted from X to Z, right? Because that means X would be decreasing voters and Z would be increasing voters all at the same time with just one switch. So what you want to do is find out the difference between these two. So 7,400 minus 5,250 gives you, let me think here, 2,150, right? So that means 2,150 is the difference between candidate X and candidate Z, right? So if you divide that by 2, right, because if you change 1 from X to Z, it's again, you're decreasing X but also increasing Z at the same time. So if you cut them in half, right, you're doing twice the damage with one change, you're going to get 1075. So if 1,075 people change from X to Z, that will account for a difference of 2,150 votes, right? Because, or at least a change in that. It's like in sports, if you have, a one-game lead on somebody, if you lose and they win, it's, it doesn't go by half games anymore. It's a full game. So it's kind of like, you're getting two birds with one stone. I already said that. All right. But the problem is 1075 is not the answer because you need to have an election in which they don't tie. Candidate Z has to receive more votes than candidate X. So 1075 only gets them a tie. 1076 would get candidate Z the win. So that is it. Hopefully you finish these slides and learn a thing or two for the PSATs coming up.